Bashar al-Assad. It came from Washington. There was a decision in 2011 to overthrow Assad. Actually, that came from Jerusalem. This has been a desire of the Israeli government that stretches back more than 25 years. Netanyahu's idea is make the Middle East in Israel's image, overthrow every government that opposes Israel. He's had a friend in that, and that is the CIA and the United States government. So this war in Syria did not come from Assad's repression. It did not come from Assad's dictatorship. This war came from a presidential order by Obama to overthrow Assad, starting in the spring of 2011. We have a name for this program. It was Operation Timber Sycamore. The United States, together with other countries in this region, trained fighters, especially jihadists, including the ones that just took power, to overthrow the regime. This created chaos. 600,000 dead in Syria in a war that has gone on for 14 years. The outcome of this war is what the CIA wanted back in 2011, which is that a jihad group would take power in Syria after being armed by the United States. The Syrian war is just one of 6 wars that Israel has promoted, including in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan. We had the list, actually, from Wesley Clark back in 2001, when he was handed a paper in the Pentagon that the goal was 7 wars in 5 years. The only war that hasn't taken place yet, to Netanyahu's great consternation, is the US war with Iran, which Israel is still trying to instigate to this very.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syrian Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's stream. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on Rumble. And I apologize for not being able to be in my own office or my home office where I usually do this stream. I'm still doing it with this small microphone. I hope that my sound is quite and clear. Kevork has not changed the time at all today because he just scheduled it 30 minutes before the live streaming. I had work to do outside of my Syriana Analysis work, and unfortunately I didn't have enough time to go back home, so I'm doing it here in an office. And because I promised to make 5 streams per week between Monday to Friday, so I will do this at a little bit later time. I started 10 minutes later, but it's going to be very, very important, and it's not going to be very long, by the way. Today it's not going to be 1 hour for sure, because I have to leave at 6 p.m. Central European time. Today's episode is going to be about Israel's strategy in Syria post-Assad, and how they think, what they are aspiring, and what they want to do in the country. Kevork, why are you talking to Syrian Goal? I am allowed to speak to whoever I want about whatever I want, and nobody has the right to tell me who I should host on this YouTube channel. For those who don't know, Syrian Girl is a Syrian, and she was born in Damascus, and she has the right to speak her mind about her country. Additionally, I have hosted many Syrians on this channel. Many of them have different opinions, so nobody has the right to tell me who I should host on this channel. If you have names to propose, you're more than welcome. But I am the one who decides who I'm going to host and what I'm going to speak about this. Whether you like their opinions or not, that's irrelevant. That's on you, to be honest with you. Everybody is welcomed. Everybody has the right to express his opinions within the within these limits of respectful conversation, which are very, very, I'm putting very limited, actually, boundaries. Just don't curse each other, guys, and don't troll each other. Just be respectful and try to learn, discuss, debate, and probably teach other people something. I'm trying my best on this channel to, between brackets, educate as many people possible about the Middle East and also Syria, because I feel and I believe that I don't only feel that, I probably know something or two about the country, including for the Syrians. Today I had some debate on X with Syrians. They claim to be Syrians. I don't know. They don't use their real names. They say they are Alawites, and they want for Israel to come for the protection of the Alawites. And the same thing we have seen for the Druze. And I said this for some time, guys. I am not going to attack the people who are sitting on the ground at gunpoint, and the Jolani regime is coming to slaughter them. This is not my intention. My intention is to try to educate the people and tell them that just like Turkey is using some of the Syrian people as pawns in the geopolitical game, Israel is also doing the same thing. And some people should go beyond this binary thinking and understand that both Turkey and Israel are imperial powers. They are not Syrians. They don't care about the Syrian people. Both have their own agendas. Therefore, when I speak about the Israeli occupation of Syria, I also speak about the Turkish occupation of Syria, and I go beyond that, and I tell you repeatedly that the Turkish occupation is more dangerous than the Israeli occupation because of the cultural and religious pillar of the Turkish empire, through which Turkey has convinced millions and probably tens of millions of Arabs and Muslims around the world that Turkey is somehow this new Islamic caliphate, where the Sultan of this Ummah, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is nothing but another player in the NATO alliance. And this NATO country leader has persuaded and basically manipulated tens of millions of people to join his ranks to fight the fight of the NATO countries, whether it's in Libya or in Syria or in Iraq, for the benefit of NATO. So Israel is no different. Israel also has its aspirations in the country. So if people see that problematic, it's a problem. I have my own YouTube channel. I can say whatever I like. People can make up their own YouTube channel and say whatever they like. So let's go back and say good evening, everyone, to Syriana Analysis. Actually, tonight I want to talk to you guys about what is really happening in southern Syria, specifically beyond the headlines of the mainstream media, beyond all the slogans, and why basically Israel sees post-Assad Syria as not as a threat to manage, but as an opportunity to remake the regional order in its favor. So I will walk you through three levels. Today's stream is going to be on three levels. The first going to be what Israel has done on the ground since the fall of Damascus in December 2024. Two, the deeper strategic logic, which means how Tel Aviv thinks about Syria, Lebanon, Iran, and Turkey. And three, where this leaves the new Syrian regime, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, and what options, basically very limited options, Damascus still has. So use this as, guys, as a backbone. You can always sharpen or soften the language when you deliver it. Like if you want to speak about this case, you can always decide and say, am I going to use a soft language or a sharp language? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be as analytical as possible today. So let's start with the basic reality. Basically, it's been almost 1 year since Bashar al-Assad, the government collapsed and he was ousted. And since then, Israel has moved very fast, guys. In the chaos of regime change, Israeli tanks rolled beyond the 1974 disengagement lines and seized roughly 400, keep this in mind, 400 square kilometer of additional Syrian territory. That is bigger than the Gaza Strip. And they also conquered basically a big chunk of the UN monitored buffer zone east of the occupied Golan Heights, including key high ground on Mount Hermon. So some people may say, so what? Like, this is probably a speculation. No, like even Western and Israeli-friendly media outlets admit, and they say it publicly and openly, Israel has entered the area of separation created after 1973 war and is now entrenching its control there. And this is in violation, of course, of the disengagement agreement that had kept the border relatively quiet for around 5 decades. On 19 November, by the way, and this was like 15 days ago, Netanyahu went down. I have shown you that video, to this seized buffer zone, so-called buffer zone, in full military gear, basically, flanked by his defense minister and chief of staff, and posed with Israeli troops on basically Syrian soil, right? Some of the media outlets described this visit and said that this is a visit to Israeli-occupied southern Syria, and Damascus basically just condemned this violation of its sovereignty, right? But we have a repeated, basically, mantra in this case, and Netanyahu basically repeated this same message, which he delivered it already to the Israeli media for months, right? Netanyahu said, southern Syria is now a permanent buffer zone under Israeli control. The Syrian, so-called Syrian army, there is no longer a Syrian army, it's just a Takfiristan and some gangs. But these militias will not be allowed back. And 3, and this is very crucial, Turkey will not be allowed in either. So this is the red lines that Netanyahu has set. So what we are seeing basically is not just some border security, as some people think. In my opinion, it is the creation of a new protectorate. How do you spell that? Protectorate. So this is not only, guys, a border security. It's a new protectorate carved out of basically Syria, right? It's a de facto extension of the Golan occupation under the slogan temporary security, which is not temporary at all. Now, for us basically to understand how we got here, right? This is how did we reach to this point? We have to remember the history of the Golan Heights and the so-called buffer zone. Now, in 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel captured and occupied most of the Golan from Syria. In 1981, Israel unilaterally annexed the territory. Of course, this move was rejected by the entire international community, whatever that means nowadays. In 1974, after the October War, a disengagement agreement created a demilitarized area of separation, and this was roughly 200 to 400 square kilometers, patrolled by the UN DOF. Those are UN peacekeeping forces. Now, Syrian and Israeli regular forces were not allowed inside this zone, which was patrolled by the UN peacekeeping forces. And that was the deal that kept the front quiet for around 40 years, right? But fast forward to 2019, during the first term of Donald Trump, Trump recognized Israeli sovereignty over the occupied Golan, again in violation, of course, of international law, but who cares about international law nowadays? That was, of course, the first step legitimizing this 1967 land grab by Israel, right? Donald Trump has given this to Israel. So what we're witnessing now, after Assad's fall, is step 2. Step 1, actually it's step 3. Step 1 is the occupation by the Israelis, and then the annexation in 81, and then Donald Trump's recognition, and this would be the 4th step, which is using the collapse of the Syrian state as an excuse to move into the so-called buffer zone and parts of Mount Hermon that Israel was explicitly required to secede and withdraw under the 1974 deal, right? So when this now Jolani minions and officials who know nothing about anything related to international law or geopolitics, when they say that Netanyahu's visit is an attempt to impose a new fait accompli in the south of Syria, we have to ask them, okay, what are you going to do about it, right? we know that this is a systematic dismantling of the post-1973 security architecture on the Syrian-Israeli front in Israel's favor. But what are you going to do about it, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, right? Nothing. Today I was reading an article for Giorgio Cafiro, and this is the article I just want to show you. Occupation and Opportunity, Israel's Strategy in Post-Syria Assad. And I have gotten some, let's say, arguments from this article, which I believe are factually correct. So Giorgio Cafiro is arguing that Israel is using the vacuum of post-Assad Syria to entrench military dominance and prevent the emergence of any new regional order that would restrain its power. Giorgio Cafiro quoted Nader Hashemi, describing Israel as a mafia don. He says the goal is not just to defend the house, it is to control the entire neighborhood. So making sure no rival can ever rise. Joshua Landis, Professor Joshua Landis, who has been watching Syria for decades, I mean, I disagree with him on many things, but he described this saying that today, correctly, unfortunately, he says, quote, today Syria lies in pieces at Israel's feet. Where? At Israel's feet. Unfortunately, he's correct on this. And this is the core of Israel's long-term strategy, right? And it's the same logic in that Israel has been trying to implement and failed, but now it is a possibility for them. There is the opportunity to implement it, right? And this strategy is first, Israel wants Syria and Lebanon to remain weak and fragmented, politically divided, militarily disarmed, economically dependent. A sovereign, reasonably united Syrian state with its own air defense, its own alliances, and its own strategic depth is seen as an unacceptable risk. They will never tolerate that. Secondly, Israel sees the devastating blows dealt in 2024 to Iran's so-called axis of resistance, like Hezbollah weakened, the Syrian army broken, Iran itself hit by joint US-Israeli strikes and is now isolated within its borders. Israel sees all this as opportunities and historic opening to lock in regional hegemony, right? So if you think in Israel's strategic terms, this is basically a dream scenario. Assad is gone, the Syrian army is shattered, Hezbollah is licking its wounds in Lebanon, Iran is under pressure at home and abroad. So why would Israel now agree to any arrangement that limits its freedom of movement in Syria? Why would they even agree anything with this Jolani regime? Actually, Israel believes its future security is best guaranteed by keeping Syria and Lebanon weak and fragmented. And Netanyahu has been extraordinarily successful in destroying the old order in the region. After October 7, that is exactly what we are seeing today. So the old regional balance, which was Syria, Hezbollah, Iran on one side, Israel and the US on the other, this formula is gone, guys. It's over. Whoever says otherwise, I don't know. I just don't agree with them. I don't want to say more. And in the place of this former equation, Israel is trying basically to construct a map where it faces simply no serious conventional rival on any border, whether this is political rivalry, economic rivalry, or even military. Today, I have also read a thread by Karim Franceschi. I'm butchering his family name for sure, 100%. But I believe he's a French-Moroccan ex-fighter in Syria. He fought against ISIS with SDF. And this is what he said. And if you're liking, by the way, guys, this informative geopolitical content on Syriana Analysis, I would really appreciate it if you just hit the like button and probably leave a comment so that this stream would reach to more people. So Karim Franceschi's thread on Syria, which by the way went viral a few days ago on X, he added basically another layer to this analysis. Karim described Syria today as a chessboard where every actor claims ideology or security, but the game is pure Machiavellian. And I believe he is correct. It's a pure Machiavellian statecraft. Karim noted something very important in this thread, and that is Netanyahu is unusually open about his Syria doctrine. So after touring the occupied Golan and the new front in Quneitra last week, Netanyahu basically declared, saying, Southern Syria is now our buffer zone under our control, and neither these Jolani gangs called the Syrian army nor Turkey will be allowed in. So this one sentence basically tells you everything, right, about the future of Syria and how Israel sees Syria. Basically, this is not a temporary security measure, like some people trying to portray. It is presented as a permanent so-called buffer zone. Israel is not only excluding the Syrian regime, it is also explicitly blocking another regional power in this case, and that is Turkey, from filling the vacuum, right? So Karim in this thread reminded us that Turkey, through the MIT and its proxy factions, has spent more than a decade engineering demographic change in northern Syria, arming Islamist groups and sabotaging any attempt at reunification, including talks between the SDF and the Syrian transitional government. Because from Tel Aviv's perspective, the Turkish activism in the north is also a threat. So Netanyahu frames Israel's seizure of the buffer zone not only as a shield against so-called terrorism. I mean, there are terrorists anyways, but they are not posing any sort of terrorism threat on Israel. I mean, the Jolani regime. So this is not only against the Jolani regime and Iran, but as a way to block also Turkish expansion as well, right? For example, Netanyahu bragged that Israel bombed the T4 airbase, and this is in central Syria, and this was a critical logistics hub and potential air defense node, right? And Turkey wanted to replace the Iranian presence there in central Syria. But Netanyahu put this, he described his policy in the most Machiavellian terms. He said, we dictate the rules and you guys adapt. And you can't do anything about it. So Israel decided, basically, or decides, which foreign army can move where on Syrian soil. Sallim li ala al-siyada ya habibi ya Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. Anyways, if we put all this analysis together between Giorgio Cafiro, Joshua Landis, and also Karim, they all converge basically in one point. And that is Israel's strategy is to never allow Syria to rebuild functional air defense systems. Those days are gone. This T4 airbase has been hit at least half a dozen times since 2018. Every time Damascus tries to move advanced air defenses, I mean, Damascus in the past under Assad, or Iran attempted back then to establish a protected corridor across Syria, Israeli jets strike them, right? So from the Israeli point of view, they will never allow Syria to regain control of their own skies, and they will not allow Iran to secure land-air bridge to the Levant, and they will not allow any sovereign Syrian state with military autonomy in the near future or in the foreseeable future. Now, let's look a little bit to the negotiating table and ask ourselves this very simple question. What leverage does this so-called new Syrian president, the self-appointed president, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, actually have? What can he play with the Israelis? If you see him on the ground, Israel holds the whip hand, to borrow, so Israel holds the whip hand. It controls the occupied Golan plus an extra 400 square kilometer inside Syria in the Quneitra region, including high ground with commanding views into to the interior, basically to Damascus. Israel has positioned itself as the protector of the Druze communities on both sides of the line, something Netanyahu emphasized again in his recent visit, and now they're doing the same thing with the Alawites. Israel enjoys uncontested air superiority and has already shown it can hit Syrian and even Iranian targets with almost complete impunity. On the other hand, what does the Golani Syria have? Golani Syria has a shattered army dependent on foreign training and equipment. Golani Syria faces massive reconstruction needs and crippling sanctions even after some have been eased. Golani Syria relies heavily on US goodwill for sanctions relief and on regional backers for financial survival. So what can, under such circumstances, Golani actually offer Israel? Maskhara, right? This is a maskhara situation. At best, Golani can offer a good neighborliness, right? We can be good neighbors. They could offer, I don't know, intelligence coordination against what? ISIS? He was from ISIS. He could offer maybe keeping the Palestinian factions under control away from the borders, and also Hezbollah's borders are sealed, and probably accepting some of the demilitarized zones in the south in exchange for phased Israeli withdrawal from the newly occupied buffer, which they will never ever do. So Netanyahu looks at that offer, and according to basically multiple Israeli reports, essentially says, why should I trade a concrete strategic asset? Those are territory, high ground, freedom of action, for what? For a piece of paper that mostly benefits Syria? He will never do that. He will never do that. And I feel so sad that anyone in Damascus or in this new Golani regime maybe thinks that they can do anything about this. So this is why, guys, Israeli officials talk about demand, like they talk about these demands, like they have more demands. They have the demand of a corridor between the Golan Heights to Jabal al-Druze or Jabal al-Arab. This is in the Sueda region under Israeli control or supervision. They want to open so-called humanitarian corridor. They're asking for an expansive demilitarized zone on the Syrian side, and also the right to conduct future airstrikes inside Syria if Israel claims there are hostile formations. Almost basically a formalization of the current situation, right? So in other words, a peace or security agreement that codifies Israeli military dominance and the Syrian vulnerability. Guys, this political theater around Netanyahu's so-called buffer zone visit, of course, is part of this bargaining, right? Israeli media, if you follow, several of them reported that after Golani's high-profile visits to Riyadh and Washington, with Trump lifting his terrorist designation and hinting at sanctions relief, he came back, quote-unquote, inflated, believing he now had American backing to push for a tougher line with Israel. He really thinks that he will get some support from Donald Trump on the expense of Israel. Anyways, Netanyahu's response, of course, was to fly straight into the seized Syrian territory, the recently seized territory, hand out symbolic gifts like a fire truck to Druze communities, and send a very public message to the world. Basically saying whatever perfume Golani comes back from the White House, the balance of power is still written in tanks and fighter jets. Washington, of course, may host Golani, but Israel will decide how far he can go on the ground. Israel is setting the rules. One Israeli minister even mocked Golani, by the way, saying he returned from from Washington with nothing but the smell of Trump's cologne. Of course, he's basically saying, you may be useful to us as a counterweight to Hezbollah and Iran, but don't overplay your hand. We want you to be against Iran and Hezbollah and against the Palestinians, but you're in our pockets. Don't try. Of course, Jolani, in this design and under these conditions, he is both useful and expendable, right? Useful as long as he keeps Syria fragmented, keeps these jihadi and Islamist factions under some control and away from the borders with Israel, and aligns with the US regional priorities. Also, Jolani is expendable because the moment he tries to cross certain red lines, for example, I don't know, inviting Iranian advisors or allowing Hezbollah fighters to smuggle weapons, or demanding full Israeli withdrawal from all post-1974 occupied areas, they will remove him as quicker as he thinks. Believe me, quicker as he may think. Now, some of you guys may ask, where does the US fit into all this? I think only the United States has the power to pressure Israel into accepting limits, whether territorial, military, or political. Neither the Gulf monarchies nor Turkey can protect Syria or force Israel to compromise. But look at Trump's agenda right now. He is trying to implement his Gaza Grand Plan strategy, which already consumes enormous political capital with Israel. At the same time, Trump is pushing through a massive F-35 sale to Saudi Arabia up to 48 fifth-generation jets, which is extremely sensitive for Israel's so-called qualitative military age. And in any ways, what can the Saudis do with these F-35s? Can they really fly them? Can they really use them efficiently? They couldn't use the previous generation of these F-16s against the Houthis fighting them with sandals for over how many years? 8 years. They basically committed a genocide in Yemen because they are so incapable and incompetent in using the weapons. Part of it, at least. Anyways, but there is also another hard question, right? Will Trump really expend additional capital on behalf of Jolani? Someone who until months ago was officially listed as a terrorist. And for what? To roll back Israel's buffer zone occupation. Guys, realistically, that seems to me very unlikely. Of course, from Washington's standpoint, if Israel's occupation of southern Syria weakens Iran, constrains Hezbollah, and keeps Turkey in check, it can be quietly tolerated, especially if Jolani is still willing to cooperate on so-called fight against ISIS and other issues in the region, such as the Palestinians. And this brings us to Henry Kissinger's old warning. The demand for absolute security by one state produces absolute insecurity for everyone else. And this is basically a stable order, guys, in the region requires some balance of power, right? Not one actor with overwhelming dominance. So if Syrians are forced to live in permanent insecurity with their south occupied, their skies open, and their sovereignty conditional, they will naturally look for external balancers, right? In this case. Israelis know it, but they're playing with fire, in my opinion, in Syria. And this fire could ignite new confrontation and new instability in the region, but Israelis do not care. They want absolute dominance. This is a doctrine. So let's ask ourselves a very simple and important question. Where does all this that I explained today leave Syria and the region? First, for Syria, Syria's map is fragmented. We have Turkish controlled zones in the north, US and SDF in the east, Israeli occupation in the south. Of course, Turkish occupation as well is the same. Both are occupation, Turkish occupation and also Israeli occupation. So we have Turkish occupation in the north, Israeli occupation in the south, and American occupation in the east, and now you have the Russian forces in the west, and also you have a weak central government in Damascus. What are they trying to do? Build from ruins? We have also in Syria a new regime which cannot wage a conventional war to recover territory because they destroyed their own national army. They fought against it for over 14 years. And they imposed draconian sanctions on their own economy. So the economy is now crippled, and they succeeded this economy. And you have foreign troops everywhere. We have in Syria a so-called diplomacy that is constrained by dependence, complete dependence on US sanctions relief and Gulf money. Jolani cannot simply pivot fully to Moscow or Tehran, of course, without risking this lifeline, and he will not do it. For Israel, however, this is the best strategic buffer it has ever had on its Syrian front, not only the old Golan Heights, but now a deeper belt inside Syria and a shattered neighbor. Israel also can play Jolani, Turkey, Iran, and the Gulf against each other, always positioning itself as this indispensable military power that sets the rules from the Jordan River up to Mount Hermon. For Turkey, Ankara has been basically effectively blocked in the south. Its decade-long bet on proxy warfare, demographic engineering, and Muslim Brotherhood politics has produced blowback and mistrust across the region. And now, even Israel sees Turkish proxies as potential future threat, in some scenarios more dangerous than Iran. This is what they say. We'll see about that. So when we ask what Israel's strategy in post-Assad Syria, the answer is very simple, guys. And I think we can summarize them in 4 points. 1, territorial entrenchment, and this means turning temporary incursions into a permanent buffer zone under Israeli control. 2, air dominance, preventing any reconstruction of Syrian or Iranian air defense networks that could constrain Israeli operations. 3, political fragmentation, which means keeping Syria divided between competing external patrons and local factions so that no sovereign state emerges with the capacity to deter Israel. And 4th, finally, regional balancing, which means using the Syrian chessboard to manage rivalries with Turkey, Iran, and even Saudi Arabia, always from a position of superior force. Let's ask ourselves just final question, guys. What can Syrians do under such circumstances? Personally, I don't have an easy answer, and anyone who basically pretends there is a simple answer, I don't think this guy is serious. But we have few things that we could elaborate, or we could focus, or say those points are clear, right? First, any new Syrian political order that wants long-term survival must rebuild internal legitimacy across sects, regions, and communities, not just rely on foreign actors like Jolan is trying to do. A fragmented Syria is precisely what Israel wants. 2, Syria needs to diversify its external relationship without becoming a pawn, which they already became nowadays. And they have to work with different actors to balance the power, right? But if every foreign actor treats Syria as a platform to fight their own wars, the country will never recover. And third, there must be a clear national red line on sovereignty, which is no recognition of new borders, no acceptance of permanent divisions. I mean, this is something that it's a 101 of international politics, or anyone who wants to lead a country, unfortunately, that the Jolani regime doesn't understand these things, neither his officials. And the fourth and the last thing is, like, the region, guys, as a whole has to confront the Kissinger dilemma, right? If Israel insists on absolute security through occupation and overwhelming force, there will be no real security for anyone, including Israelis. Sooner or later, people under permanent humiliation look for new means for resistance, And we have seen this dynamic over and over again, everywhere in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Iraq, name it, right? Anyways, I wanted to make these guys for you to see the real Israeli strategy in Syria. I wanted to explain this to you. I think, let me just check. Mike August, thank you, my friend, for becoming a member, a YouTube member on Syriana Analysis. Today's stream is going to be shorter. It's already 40 minutes. And as you can see, I'm not in my office. I'm not at my home. I couldn't do it at home, but I made sure that I could do something for you today, guys. Today, like 40-minute stream explaining Israeli strategy. If you like this stream and you want this stream to be watched by other people as well, please hit the like button, thumbs up before leaving. Subscribe to Syriana Analysis and probably leave a comment. That would be great. And if you'd like to do more and support Syriana Analysis, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling in the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you tomorrow for sure. But most likely, I will see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central European time, which is 12 noon time in Eastern American time. I have a very long podcast interview tomorrow, around 1.5 to 2 hours, with our friend Firas. And unfortunately, I will not be able to start on time, but I will do it definitely 1 hour later on the usual schedule. So I will keep you posted tomorrow on my social media accounts. Peace be upon you, upon your families, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you watch this on YouTube or on Rumble. Salam.